crucifixion of Jesus. The crucifixion of Jesus is when Jesus died on the cross for our sins. Historians believe that Jesus died on the cross in 30 AD. And then 40 years later, in 70 AD, the Jewish diaspora happened, which caused Jerusalem to fall. But if you've seen our last video, the true reason why Jerusalem fell is because Israel has rejected God. And now we know this. But even after all that happened to Jerusalem, the Jews today, so-called the people of God, believe today that Jesus was just a man. He wasn't God. That's what they believe. But today, I'm going to prove to the Jews that Jesus is the Son of God. And He did die for our sins. And we're going to look into this one prophet that says it all. And that is the prophet Isaiah. Okay, so today we are going to look at the Isaiah prophecy, okay? So, in case you don't know, that Jews and Muslims do use the Old Testament, okay? They believe that the Old Testament was inspired by God, but they don't believe that the New Testament is inspired by God. They think the New Testament is just full of sinners. That's what they think. But today I'm going to use the Old Testament to prove to everyone that Jesus is the Messiah. And today we will look into that. So we're going to look at verse by verse in Isaiah chapter 53. And we will look at the first verse at Isaiah 53 verse 2. Who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? So honestly, I'm not really too sure on what it means, but what I have concluded so far is that what Isaiah is saying is that who has believed the message, okay? And who has seen the power of the Lord? That's what I'm thinking right now. My servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, but like a root in dry ground. So before we continue reading on to verse 3, it says here that my servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot. Okay, so like a tender green shoot, like moist soil, I guess, good soil, grew up in like the high heavens, But then it says here, like a root in dry ground. So what it's saying is that Jesus grew up in the high heavens, but then when he came here on the earth, it was like a root from dry ground. He didn't look like he came from the heavenly places. He looked like he was a dry plant, He didn't look like he came from rich soil, basically. Verse 3 says, he was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. So, by the way, what I think about this, honestly, is he was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with the deepest grief. So, when you're thinking about it, it even says in the beginning of the book of John, and there it says that when Jesus came down, the people of Jerusalem rejected him. It says that in the beginning of the book of John, the people rejected him. They rejected Jesus. It says it here at 1 John 10 through 11. He came into the very world he created, but the world did not recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected them. So it says here, even in the book of John, hundreds of years later, that they have rejected Jesus. And the people of God are who? Jerusalem. Jerusalem and their people, and they rejected him. And even the Jews today rejected Jesus. They think he was nothing but a sinner. But Jews, with the very prophet that you look up to, is saying in his text that the Messiah is Jesus, and it's not symbolic in several ways. And we will look at this again, and then we will continue reading. And then later on, you will see that Jesus really was the Messiah. Let's go back to Isaiah chapter 53, and we will look back at Isaiah 53 verse 3. So, Israel, which in Jesus' time was the Jews, they rejected Jesus. It says it here. And it is true, because I just proved it to you by looking at the book of John. So, now we see that the people of Israel has rejected Jesus. They didn't believe that he was the true Messiah. And it doesn't make sense that it was Israel, because the people of God is Israel. And here it says they were talking about the Son of God, the King. So now we will look at the next verse, on verse 4. Yet it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down, and thought his troubles were a punishment of God, a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion. He was crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we can be whole. He was whipped so we can be healed. So it says here that Jesus, the people of Israel, thought that Jesus was whipped as a punishment from God. But no. He was crucified so our sins will be forgiven. He was whipped so we will be healed. And it even says it when Pilate, even says it when the people of Israel were talking to Pilate. Matthew chapter 27, verse 24 to 25. Pilate saw he wasn't getting anywhere, and that the riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours. And the people yelled back, we will take the responsibility of his death. We and our children. So, now you see in here is that they were so positive that this man was a sinner, that he deserves to be killed, that even they took the responsibility. And it shows here that Israel really did reject what is good, and that they did, rejected God. And trust me, if you still think that this is not enough proof that Jesus is the Messiah, it even says it, like literally, when Jesus died, it was a historical fact. It was historical. And we even know that the Old Testament was written before Jesus was even born. And it's true. It's true. So, we are going to continue to talk about this. Let's go back to Isaiah chapter 53. And now we will look at verse 7 and 8. And it says, "He was oppressed and treated harshly, yet he never said a word. He was led like a lamb to the slaughterer, and as a sheep is silent before the shears, he did not open his mouth. Unjustly condemned, he was led away. No one cared that he died without descendants, that his life was cut short and midstream, but he was struck down." Well, all this is true, and was one fact is that Jesus didn't have any children. So yeah. And it says here that he did not say the word. He didn't. And how do we prove this? That he did not say the word? We will hear the words of Jesus himself. It says, "Put away your sword," Jesus told them. "Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I can ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he will send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describes what must happen now?" So it says it here that Jesus could send thousands of angels to protect us. Now remember that. Jesus could send thousands of angels to protect us. By doing what? Asking his Father. And how do we ask our Father today? By prayer, by speaking with our mouth to the Father. And that's how Jesus would ask the Father. So Jesus didn't open his mouth and pray to the Father. He didn't. What he did, he kept his mouth shut. He kept his mouth shut. So, if you go back and see the scriptures that we read in Isaiah 53, especially the verse that we just looked at previously, you will see that the prophet Isaiah say that this person will shut his mouth as he goes to be killed, just as a sheep goes to be sheared. Because the scriptures must come to pass. Because that right there is a promise to us that this king will die for our sins. He was whipped so we could be healed. So, by looking at this video, Jews and Muslims, if you're watching this, how is Jesus not the Messiah? I'm Suji Testimony, and everyone, I will see you later.